Well, have a good day, everyone. Today with us we have Milton Berman. He's the product owner of Rif Identity. It's an amazing technology we're developing here at the IOB Labs family. It's in charge of Riff. Milton has a lot of experience working on the self-sovereign identities, decentralized identities, and today he's going to show what he has been building during the last couple of months. He has joined the IOB Labs family almost a year ago. Before he worked as CTO of Didi. That it's also a great project that if you want, Milton, I think that you can tell us about a little bit about it and how is it growing here in Buenos Aires. It's like a better project that can scale and go to every slum and every
neighborhood.
Yes, every neighborhood that has some financial trouble or some financial issues or needs to go more for the inclusive finance. So the idea of these webinars is for people to participate. You can always write on the chat box or on the questions, and we will try to answer them on the meantime, or we'll be also leaving some last minutes of this webinar for you to answer them directly. I would be also sharing some links so you can also explore what is this technology is about, and also leaving you an email address where you can always send your requests or ask for more information. And so, this is pretty much up to you. Thank you, Milton, for joining us, and I'll be backstage and I'll be helping you in case you need everything. So, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Fran, for the presentation. Now, Amelia will share the actual PowerPoint we have. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in this Reef and RSK webinar series. And thanks everyone that is watching right now and the ones that will watch later on YouTube. This webinar, as Fran told, will be about self-sovereign identity and how Reef tackles this matter. I will present a little bit myself. I am Milton Berman. I'm Rif Identity's product owner. That is the identity and reputation layer for the Reef products. Reef is the RSK infrastructure framework. That is a framework for developers to better interact with blockchain and decentralized technologies. I am an informatics engineer, graduated at Universidad de Buenos Aires in Argentina. In the past, as Fran mentioned, I've been also the CTO of the Didi project, another blockchain and digital identity related project I will mention afterwards. And yes, I'm really happy and passionate about working with decentralized technologies, blockchain and self-sovereign identities. I think I've seen other webinars, so I have to talk a little bit about myself. What do I like? I really enjoy about being with my family, with my little baby. But I also like to play sports, especially football. I am a big fan of River Plate here in Argentina. And I know because of the pandemic, we cannot play more football, so now I became a paddle fan. I am playing paddle. It's my new sport because of the pandemic, but I hope we can play football again. So now going back to the presentation, this is the agenda. We will be talking about identity and credentials, also the internet and identity issues, how a change of paradigm can be next to us. Also, we will talk about the specific issue of this presentation. So what is self-sovereign identity? And especially about Rif Identity and SSI use case mentioned before, that is the Didi project. And then we will open for Q&A. So in the next slide, we will talk about identity. So what is identity and how do we identify ourselves? So if I ask you or anyone to tell me what is identity, we will have infinite answers, and there is no clear definition of that. Many could think about passports, national IDs, others could think about gender identity or the right to have an identity, the identity of a town or a culture. Why not the identity of a basketball team, how it plays? But all of them are complicated definitions to start with. So I always like to start with what we use when we presented 2 years ago in the Ibero-American Decentralized Identity report. And that is the World Economic Forum definition of identity. And it talks about attributes and 3 types of attributes. One type is the inherent attributes, that is something that you have because you were born, or a thing is here, such as your height, the place where you were place of birth, your fingerprints. Then you can have accumulated attributes that could be, for example, health records, or your preferences, your behavior, and then assigned attributes that others give you some attributes or some identification, such as a national identification number, a passport, or a telephone number. So related to this one, the assigned attributes, there are many instances in life where we need to prove our identity. For example, if you want to buy a plane ticket or purchase alcohol. And the assigned attributes are what we call credentials that are issued by parties, by third parties. And we use these credentials in different ways. For example, the passports, we leave them at home unless we fly, but we have to carry on our national ID all the time. And credentials are used as a proof of trust. You can trust my age because the government issued my ID, and I can show it to you. And there is the global standard for this type of credentials right now is paper. So in this digital age moment that we live in, paper seems to be no longer working. There's no equivalent for paper credentials in the digital world nowadays. So that's why we have this question. How can we identify ourselves online right now? It's difficult to probe distrust on our identity online. We end up sharing lots of our personal details with the services we want to access online, and they finally are in control of all of our data instead of us. And this data is also kept in centralized silos, which are at risk of security breaches or being abused by holders in different ways. And also, it's a burden for the ones that verify these credentials nowadays to check it. It's really you need a lot of time and resources to verify some kind of documents for a bank to check your credit history, or for example, a policeman to check your ID. It's not that easy, and it's really takes a lot of cost. So one of the reasons it's difficult to identify ourselves online right now and to emulate what we have in the analog world with the paper credentials is because of this saying of King Cameron from Microsoft that said in 2005, the internet was built without an identity layer. And he was right. And because of that, digital identity was built in a chaotic way. One patch above the other, and not many well-thought and interoperable standards were built. Nowadays, as we can see here, our digital identities mainly rely on the centralized services provided by the tech companies. And because of that, when we sign their terms and conditions, we are giving out all the control of our digital information to them. And they can modify it, erase it, sell it to others without our consent. So what I say when I talk about this is that we lost our privacy. We can recover it, but nowadays we lost it. In the past few years, this model proved to be against the interest of the people. Privacy concerns arose in platforms such as Facebook. Here we can see that Facebook was apologizing because of some privacy issues they had, and we know about also a Cambridge Analytica attack. And also great data breaches happen in others, such as Equifax or Yahoo, where many of the private and important information of the people were hacked and used and abused by hackers. So one of these problems is the single point of failure that these models have nowadays. So with Rif Identity, we want to be a force to push towards a change of the current digital identity paradigm. We want to move from Identity 2.0 to Identity 3.0. And this graph shows the shift from 2.0 to 3.0. As we can see in this slide, typically, when we interact with digital services such as social networks, mobile operating systems, sharing economies, banks, etc., we cannot control much of what happens with our information. We are there in those, as we see it in the drawing, we are not in control of anything. We are there in those dotted lines inside of bubbles. And the main and the big tech companies are in the middle, controlling everything. As I mentioned before, these service providers have full control of our info. We cannot even port our reputation to other services, not even prevent our info to be accessed by third parties without our consent. So when we talk about Identity 3.0, we talk about a human-centric model, where we are in the middle, we are in the center. We control our data, how we use it when interacting with companies, peers, banks, and governments. We are talking about recovering our privacy, as I mentioned before. I think we can do it, or at least do better in this field for the future generations. I really would like my daughter to have better digital privacy than what I have nowadays. But we won't be alone in this endeavor. We only the Rif Identity. No, we will do it using and following self-sovereign identity models that are being used nowadays all around the world. So these self-sovereign identity models. What is self-sovereign identity? Nowadays it's important to notice that there are lots of different interpretations about what SSI is and what it's trying to achieve. But many people have been working in the past years to find and build this identity layer that was missing in the internet. One of these persons, that is Christopher Allen, he wrote a blog post in 2016 that was a consolidation of all that previous work that was done by many people and organizations in the past. And he set up the guidelines for what is now known as the SSI movement. In this quote, you can see what Christopher put in his blog post. We could sum up the concept well, like enhance the ability of digital identity to enable trust while preserving individual privacy. And I mentioned and I remarked there privacy because we have to remember that it's a human right. And we don't have to take for granted that we have to lose privacy and we don't care about it. It is a human right for something. So going to the next slide, we can mention some of the benefits of the self-sovereign identity. One of them is that you can choose how much information you want to share, and also you don't have any intermediaries. You are in control of your data, and you don't need to fill long and difficult registration forms once enable the self-sovereign identity. And these benefits are based on the 10 principles of the self-sovereign identity that are mentioned in the next slide. We won't be talking much about this. You can read in Christopher's blog post. We have the link there, and then we can share it. But yes, we can mention each one of them. One is existence. The users must have an independent existence. The other one is control, that the users must control their identities, must have control over their identities. The third one is access. Users must have access to their own data at all time. They don't have to be restricted to do that. The fourth one, transparency. Systems and algorithms must be transparent. We have to aim to have as much open source as we can to validate and trust in the system. The fifth one is persistence. Identity must be long-lived. Regardless, a company disappears or anything happens to the one that you are interacting with, we need persistence of our data. The sixth is portability. Information and services about identity must be transportable. So if I have information about me in one website, for example, reputation in Uber, I have to have the chance to port my reputation to other services such as Lyft. So I don't have to start again, all over again. I have my reputation. I have the right to port it wherever I want. And the seventh one is interoperability. Identity should be as widely usable as possible. And here we talk about this non-standard when internet was built, and these different standards that were rising, but none of them was perfect, for us to say. We need more interoperability. The eighth one is consent. The users must agree to the use of their identity. Whenever we want to interact with a digital service, we have to have the chance to say if we want to do it, if we want to share what I want to share, and when I want to share, and to whom. And then the ninth is minimization. I think this is the most interesting one because it says that disclosure of claims must be minimized. And I like this because nowadays, for example, when you do KYC or you share your national identity card to anyone, you share a lot of information. Your name, your surname, where you live, your identity number, when were you, how old were you, where were you birth. Also, in some countries, your blood type. In Argentina, also, we have something that is called trámite number that is really dangerous to share. So when we share this card, we share a lot of info. And this principle of minimization is about sharing the less info you can whenever you interact with digital services. So if I can share only, if you need my name or my national ID, I want to share only that. And I don't want to share the rest of the data I have mentioned. And this is really important to take into account every time we build these new systems. And the 10th one is protection. The rights of the users must be protected. So going to the next one. I have this picture of Andreas Antonopoulos that he will help me to talk about some important concepts related to self-sovereign identity. And I'm happy because he, a couple of weeks or less than a month ago, he uploaded a video where he talked more than an hour about decentralized identity. Self-sovereign identity is also known as decentralized identity, and he talked a lot about it, and I'm happy he did because he always talks about interesting and important things, and if he starts talking about this, it says that we are going in the good path. And well, he had a funny way to talk about important concepts of SSI, and if we go to the next slide, we will know which are those concepts. So he mentioned about the identity as the base layer, but then he differentiated, and it's okay that he did that, from the identifiers. Identity is a broader concept that we talk and difficult to define. An identifier is a specific way of identifying a person or a thing. And then there are other concepts such as attestations and roles. In the next slide, I have we can see how they are linked to some standards. The attestations that Andreas mentioned are linked to the verifiable credential standard that we will talk right now. The identifier would be related to the decentralized identifier standard. And also the roles are important in these models, because we have to understand who is the issuer, who is the identity controller, and who is the verifier of the identity. In the next slide, we will start tackling this concept that I want to share. So, talking about the first standard I want to mention is about the verifiable credential standard. The W3C has continued this work of building this identity layer above internet, and they have been doing some interesting standards. One of these, and I think is one of the most important here, is the verifiable credentials standard. And what is a verifiable credential? It is a digitally signed attestation with three main components. One component would be the issuer. The issuer is the one that emits the credential, that issues the credential. This attestation is something that an issuer says. For example, a government says that Francisco is the owner of a driver's license. Then the subject is the other component here that is more important, is the one that the issuer is talking about of. So in this case, it would be Francisco. And then the attestation itself is what the issuer is talking about, what is he saying about other. And this verifiable credential could be from, as I said, a driver's license to a club card, to somebody attesting that he knows me, or maybe, as I said before, Uber saying that I am a 5-star driver. It could be anything. And the other characteristics that are important in a verifiable credential are these 4 characteristics that are the data integrity. Verifiable credentials should have integrity of the data. That means that if the data is modified, you would know. So whenever you can verify a VC, you are sure that the information has not been tampered by anyone. Also, the issuer authenticity is important. You can always know who was the one that issued this credential. And a non-repudiation, the one who issued cannot deny having issued the credential before. And also interesting characteristic that sometimes is not mentioned, that is non-transferable. If I get a VC, a verified credential, it is mine, and it will never be assigned to any other than me, unless I can do. There are some delegation of decentralized identifier, but that are specific cases. But it's not transferable as it is, for example, transferable a token in a blockchain, Bitcoin or Smart Bitcoin or Riff, whatever. Then I will continue with these concepts that Andreas mentioned. I want to talk about them, and these are the roles here. We have 3 main roles. One are the issuers that I was talking before of the verifiable credentials. The issuer could be a government, could be a company, could be a bank, could be a person, could be myself, could be a system, whatever. The important is that issuer generates verifiable credentials. Then we have the identity controllers that are the subject of those credentials. And I mentioned them as identity controllers because the one that controls the DID and the private key associated to it is the one that will control all the information assigned to that person. So the other important role are the verifiers, that are in this case, it could be also the government, it could be a policeman, it could be a bank, it could be a company, also it could be a person, it could be a system, it could be whatever, that will receive the presentation of the verifier credentials from the identity controller and will check if they are correct. And to check that, they will check if the identity controller is the owner or the controller of the identity. If we have those characteristics mentioned before, if the data is integrated, if I have not been tampering it, if I am the actual owner of it, and if the issuer is a known issuer and a verified issuer or not. And the most important thing here is that the verifiable credentials that will be held by the identity controllers have to be private. They have to remain private, and they usually will be stored in a wallet. Then we will talk a little bit more of it, but the important thing is that that information is private to the user and no one else can see it unless the identity controller wants to. So then, continuing with the concepts here, the other one I want to mention is we have about roles, we have one more, that is the trust triangle. That is something that, no, it's okay, the slide. I took this from Sovereign, that is a self-sovereign identity blockchain, and they explain this very well. They talk about this trust triangle, where these three actors, the issuer, the holder or the controller, and the verifier, they interact between each other. And then the issuer knows the holder and he issues a verifier credential. The holder knows the verifier and he proves that he has a verifier credential issued by the issuer. And then the verifier can verify it because of cryptographic characteristics that I have been mentioning before. Anyone can verify it if you know the algorithm to verify. This is public and it's easy to do and it's really quick. But now the important thing that is in that dotted line is the trust. The verifier can know that the issuer did it, that the holder didn't modify the data, that he's the actual one that has the credential. But then the verifier has to decide if he trusts or not in the issuer. If my mother said, okay, Milton has the best credit record, he can get a loan of $1 million, then the bank would say, okay, I know it was your mother, that is a real verifiable credential, but the bank will never give me the loan. But if, I don't know, Bank of America says that I am trustful to receive a $1 million, and the verifier checks that Bank of America really did it, well, he will for sure trust more in that bank than in my mother to give me the loan. So that's an interesting concept about the trust triangle here. And then, yes, continuing with the W3C standards, the other that is really important here is the decentralized identifier concept. So ID is a single is a string that is composed by three parts: the URI schema identifier, that is the ID, the identifier for the DID method. The DID method is how you will interact with the DID method, with the DIDs, and the DID method specific identifier. So these are some examples. First one is a generic one. Then you have an example for the sovereign network. Then for Ethereum, the one that was built by Uport. And then for RSK, the one we are now using, also in RSK and Riff with the Uport's implementation. And you can see there that you first have this DID word always, then you have a colon, and then you have the method. And the method is interesting because you have to publish how anyone can do a method to resolve decentralized identifier. And that is interesting and has to do with all those principles of self-sovereign identity, that anyone can interact with this, and it should be fully interoperable and open to anyone. So anyone can say or publish the DID method. And the DID method has many specifications, and I am not talking about that today, but it says how, if I share with you a DID, my DID that I got in, for example, interacting with Rif Identity, how you should resolve it, how the verifier should resolve it, and understand how to interact with it. because in our case we are using the UPort resolvers that are the same with Ethereum, so we could be fully compatible between RSK and Ethereum. But if we want to interact with Sovereign, we have to know how to interact with them, and we should go to their DID method specification and know how to do that. And that is possible, and it's really interoperable, and it's similar to how blockchain are working right now, that they are doing connections between different blockchains. This is the idea behind this also, not letting anyone outside this. And then in the other slide, we have the other important concept of the DID standards, that is, it is always linked to a private key. Here it's similar to what we know about crypto accounts, that the DID should always be linked to a private key, that it should be only known by the controller of the identity and no one else. And also it will be linked to one at least, or many public keys that could be known by anyone. And this is important, so when the verifier checks that if you own a verifier credential, he will check if you control the DID. And he will do it with cryptographic functions, similar to the one that happened in blockchain, challenging you if you have your private key or not. And then another interesting concept that there are many other stuff interesting in this decentralized identifier standards, but the one that I wanted to mention is the DID document, that these documents are things that are linked to my DID and can be published, for example, in blockchain or any registry. And these DID documents usually have public keys associated to my identity, URLs I want to share, and I want to say who am I. For example, an entity could share his identification with his DID document, putting the URL of their company. Many ways and many stuff can be done with this DID document. It's really interesting. So going to the next one. Here's and blockchain, because I always talk about self-sovereign identity, and I kind of link it to blockchain. And we have talked a lot right now. I have not mentioned anything about blockchain, and it happens to me usually when talking about SSI. And that is because blockchains are not going 2 steps backwards. When this self-sovereign identity movement started, kind of the idea was everything has to be on blockchain, because the solution for this decentralized identity will be using blockchain and nothing else. And then it evolved during the time, and the ones that were doing these standards, they realized that blockchain was not necessary in many parts of it, but it was still a fundamental part, but not the most important. But I guess blockchain was that missing part, and that's because right now this moment is moving forward, because that missing part was not there when, for example, in the 90s, PGPs keys were tried to use as a decentralized identity system. But the most important thing I want to mention, and the most important rule about blockchain and SSI, is you should never store private information in blockchain. That seems trivial, but in the beginning, people were storing information, public information in blockchain, and as we know, blockchains are public, and if we want to have the privacy benefit of these models, we shouldn't use it for stored private information. But it could be used for other stuff. For example, a verifiable credential revocation registry, to say which verifiable credentials, if I am an issuer, which ones are no longer valid. Also, we can publish our DID documents in blockchain. For example, UPort, that is deployed in RSK and Ethereum and other compatible blockchains, uses the ERC 1056 smart contracts for DID-related actions, such as delegation of DIDs, revocation of DIDs, adding attributes to DIDs, and also they have another smart contract that is the verifiable credential status registry, many stuff. Also, for example, Sovereign has and a specific blockchain related only to self-sovereign identity. So it can be used. There are other implementations such as IAM from Microsoft and Ceramic that use blockchain for anchoring of data and then stamping it. So, well, I have talked a lot about blockchain. I think now we can go to the next slide. We are good with time, no? Yes, I think so. We now have the Reef Identity video. I would like to introduce you to Reef Identity, and I would like to share the Reef Identity video right now. I will do it. I hope you can see it well. I guess we have it. I will play it.
The internet was built without an identity layer. This has led to the abuse of personal data and censorship, and you don't know who you're dealing with unless you're physically together. Rif Identity uses blockchain technology for censorship-resistant digital ID solutions, built to be truly inclusive, human-centric, and accessible to all. Many of the world's most vulnerable populations struggle to access basic financial services, held back by a lack of formal ID or a reliable digital reputation. Decentralized solutions can give this group better access to the goods and services they need. People have increasingly lost faith in social networks to protect their privacy and data. The world's largest Spanish-speaking social media platform, Taringa, is integrating Rif Identity technology as a first step to promote fully decentralized social networks based on open-source technology. RNS offers human-readable domains for blockchain addresses, enabling decentralized ID authentication while improving the user experience for cryptocurrency. Rif Identity is also available for governments and organizations that want to protect their users, integrating verifiable credentials and self-sovereign identity to their solutions, fostering privacy and data security. Rif Identity is designed to be a paradigm changer. Let's move from Identity 2.0 to Identity 3.0. Visit rifos.org to learn more. Welcome to Rif Identity, built on top of RSK and Bitcoin.
Well, I hope you could see it, because it's really, really nice. I think Fran or Amelia will share it also, the link for you to see it yourself in YouTube. So now that we have introduced Rif Identity, I want to talk about our vision, the vision of Rif Identity. And it has to do with empowering the people to build a human-centric identity and reputation, and enable privacy by default. I have been talking about this today, so I won't get deeper. But we want it to be enhancing to have a global identity that is cross-border and cross-platform. And we will use self-sovereign identity models for this. Also, as we are working in crypto, we want to empower or to improve the user experience, to onboard users that are non-tech savvy. In crypto nowadays, it's really difficult for a user. Well, I say 95% of the population is struggling to interact with crypto, because when you onboard, you have a high wall of learnings, such as understanding what is a private key, a public key, how to preserve it. And we want to improve that user experience also. Is one of the goals of Rif Identity. So in the next one, we can see the Rif Identity Architecture here. We have 2 layers above that will be the dApps, websites, whatever we interact, digital service we interact with, both of the 2.0 world and the 3.0 world or paradigm. We want to interact with them, and we will let them do that with the Riff login. That is a product I will talk a little bit right now, that will help you, these apps and dApps to interact with other layers that are for example, the Reef data vault. The Reef data vault is where the people, the identity controllers, will hold and store all their verifiable credentials in a private way, trying to fulfill all the concepts that I have been talking in the past in this presentation. And the Reef data vault is built on top of Reef Storage, that is the layer that or the product for Reef related to decentralized storage. And it will have many flavors, the data vault. It could be, but it will always be private and controlled by the users, but it could have a decentralized flavor or a centralized flavor, depending on the situation, because we know that some companies won't be changing the paradigm that easy, but they want to give some benefits to the users. So we will do this with different options, so we have a more smooth transition for all players. And also the Reef Asset Manager, that has to do with interaction with blockchain tokens, such as NFTs, ERC20 tokens, RNS, that is the Reef Name Services, and other stuff. And also the Reef Keys, that is the way we will improve this user experience to onboard users and the way they hold and store the private keys. And below all of this, we have the RSK blockchain and also EVM compatible blockchains, obviously as Ethereum and many others that are around. And then related to Reef Identity, we expect, we can see in the next slide, to interact with different products, different adopters. We think we will start working, we started working with Taringa, that is part of IOB Labs, and they will integrate Reef Identity solutions, but we think that these solutions will be also useful for DeFi on RSK and other blockchains, for video games, for the Reef marketplace, Reef for governments, and enterprise solutions. In the next slide, I will introduce you quickly, because we are running out of time, to our model, how we will tackle the Reef Identity. What is a Reef Identity account? We have a multi-identity model we are working on, where you will be, as I said before, you will be in the center, you will be in control of your identity. So here you can see that the Reef Identity account is you, the human, a person that holds a private key. And we want him to hold only one private key and not many and different. And we want it to be easy for them to hold it. And this is a multi-identity model because with that one and only private key, you will be able to have many DIDs, many decentralized identifiers. In this case, as we are using the UPort standards, any RSK account that is derivated from that private key will be also linked to a DID that you can control. And no one can know and can link your different DIDs, and unless you say, okay, publicly I control the DID 1, 2, and 3. Unless you do that, nobody can know that without your consent. So in the next slide, I show the other important concept I have mentioned in the architecture, that is the data vault. That this data vault, as I said, is where you store your verifiable credential and the verifiable credentials and all the information related to your decentralized or self-sovereign identity. And as I said also, this I haven't said, that is, it will be the data vault, it will separate it into compartments, different compartments that don't know each other. You will know it because with your private key will be able to unlock it, but all the information will be there encrypted, and you will be the only one that will be able to decrypt it and show it and present it to others. So going to the next slide. The Reef login, I will talk a little bit about this project we are about to, or we have just started to develop this. This is a concept only. This is a mock-up. It's not the definitive version. But the idea is for, as I mentioned, give a tool, an easier tool for 2.0 apps and 3.0 for sure apps to interact with these verifiable credentials and also the blockchain assets in an easy way. So we will offer a way to integrate to websites and apps in a really easy way to the developers, for them to offer a button and a pop-up for the users to interact. For example, if we go to the next slide, we will see that if a user wants to connect with Reef Login, he will have some options from where to choose, and those options will be related to how the user wants to manage his private keys. If he's a tech-savvy or crypto user, he may want to use MetaMask or Nifty or a hardware wallet. But we could also offer traditional ways to secure that with an email and password, or, for example, something an interesting tool that is being really interesting in the past few months, that is Wallet Connect. That is a way for the people to interact from digital wallets via scanning QR codes with desktop apps. And then this other screen in this slide is something that also we want to add. We have not seen much in the market. That is the possibility for the website to request information to the users. So the website, in this case, in this example, would be Taringa, and that is one of the most important social networks in Latin America. And they would be requesting information from you when you authenticate. For example, they may say they want your DID, but they could also ask for your credential that says that you are above 18 years, or your email credential. And then the website or the apps would let you have optional sharing from some stuff. Another will be mandatory, and you will be the one that decides if he or she wants to share that information, because it's yours and it's private and it's controlled only by you. So in the next slide, well, this is a summary of Rif Identity and all the concepts I have been mentioning. Sorry, I was seeing the chat. It says that the presentation is in little. Okay. This concept, we can share the presentation later. This summarizes everything. This is the first slide I mentioned about changing from Identity 2.0 to Identity 3.0, and the possibility to have multiple identities that you will only know. So you could interact with Google and Facebook with one sub-account, and you could interact with the banks and the government with other, and they won't be able to link all that info unless not that easy as it is right now. So in the next slide, I want to mention about a little bit about the Reef services. So, and how they interact with Reef Identity. As I said, Reef is the RSK infrastructure framework and has different products to help developers interact with blockchain and decentralization technologies. And Reef Identity is interacting with the majority of them. We have Reef Storage. The Reef Storage is the layer or the product that help us interact with centralized storage, such as Swarm and IPFS. And our data vault we have to do with this. Also, we have the name services that is known as RNS, that is really tied to the identity. So you can have your domain, your blockchain domain. As you have a DNS, you can have it on blockchain, milton.rsk, and you can manage it. And you can ask people to send you money or tokens there, but also you can redirect it to IPFS hashes or to Ethereum addresses or whatever, or Bitcoin. Then we have the Riff Payments product that has to do with the way to have blockchain transactions in RSK in an easier and faster way than we have nowadays that uses the Lumino network. Then also we have the Reef marketplace that has been launched recently and lets you do, nowadays you can buy and sell your RNS domains in the marketplace, but in the future, in the near future, you will also be able to share your storage and charge the buyers for you to share your decentralized storage. You could pin the information of others and you can charge them because you share the storage of your computer via the Reef marketplace. And then the Reef gateways, that is the tools and technologies to integrate the blockchain with external world, for example, oracles. So in the next slide, I will talk quickly because we are running out of time, and I'll introduce you to a self-sovereign identity use case, which I have been working on in the past, that is called Didi. And Riff has joined Bitcoin Argentina NGO and IDB Lab and other partners for this project, in which unbanked populations that are living in slums all around the world will be helped with this, because, or we think that's the hypothesis of the project, because these populations struggle with what is known as the poverty penalties. And because of information asymmetry, they have to pay more for products and services because they don't have formal credit records with traditional institutions. So this is working in Barrio Mojica, that is one of the biggest slums in Argentina, where more than 40,000 people live nowadays. And Didi has developed a mobile decentralized identity app that is called ID, and also a platform to tackle these issues. This project, as we can see in the next slide, is a non-for-profit project. As I said, Riff is one of the main partners and donors, such as the other ones that you can see in this slide. And I think this is a beautiful use case that helps to realize that these technologies that we have been talking about, which Riff is working on, have the chance to make real impact and real difference. This is creating a verifiable identity and reputation platforms with no barriers to enter. In the next slide, we can see a little graph of what Didi does. That says it will enable that informal daily interactions to be fully verifiable and reusable. Using this self-sovereign identity concept, you won't need any intermediary to do it. People will be empowered because people living in vulnerable neighborhoods such as Barrio Mojica have a credit record, have a credit history. The people around them know if you are a good person, if you do some specific job in a good manner or not. The problem for them is that information remains only in the town, in the neighborhood, and they cannot port it or demonstrate it outside it because the typical institutions do not bother to enter there and gather information. So with it, they will be able to build their own credit and reputation history as they never did before, without the need to be banked, and that is really important. And taking a look at this example, at this graph, it says that Didi will be linking the credit history, more informal credit history, but it will be done in a verifiable way with microcredit institutions that work in the neighborhood that will be, and it is live, and they are signing verifiable credentials for the people that take microcredits from them. And also there is the peer clubs, or savings and credit peer clubs, also known as rondas or juntas or lending circles, that happens in Barrio Mojica and many other places all around the world for many years, where you interact with people and the community became a bank. And this will be fully verifiable with this technology. And the Didi will also build the possibility to build an identity. So yes, and we hope this will result in reducing this poverty penalty I have been mentioning before. Going to the next slide. We can see more information here about Rif Identity. If you are interested in our projects and our development, this is all open source. We are building this. We are using the latest technologies around, and we would like you to help us with that. You can see more info in this link of the Reef OS website of Identity. Also, we have been publishing some of our first repos of Reef Identity. There's the first link there, and there will be more soon. And also, we share information about the RNS, the Reef Name Services, that has been around for quite a while. You can interact, you can buy your domains in the marketplace, you can get your domains in the RNS manager, and also integrate it to your wallet. So I guess this was the last one. Yes, it was the last one. So thank you, everyone here. It was great to be talking for a long time. I hope you heard it. And now we have the Q&A session, I guess. I can see the chat. We have a question there from Nicolas. He says, if my Reef Identity account would be a specific token ID or NFT or a username like shondow.rsk.co, for example, not necessary, no. Your Reef Identity account, as I said, the most important thing is that you control a private key. With that private key, you can interact with the tools that will be developed by us and will enable you have and demonstrate and store your verifiable credentials, but also interact with your blockchain assets. So you can interact with an NFT or with your RNS domain, such as shondow.rsk, or with a token. But the Reef Identity account is something that is above all of this. And as I keep repeating, the most important thing is that you control your private key. And if you control your private key, you control your account and everything related to it. So I hope I could answer your question. I don't see other questions here. Yes, Nicolas says I answered the question. Great. And Stefan's, it's a great question that Stefan says. That is, what if I lose my private key? And is the most important question here. And the typical question when this kind of systems, we talk about these kind of systems, such as this one or blockchain related, where you are in control of your stuff. So we are working in these Reef keys I mentioned. We want to improve the way you control your private key. We don't want it to be centralized as it is today. For example, your Google account is managed by Google. You only know your password, but these passwords are easy to crack. We don't want to be centralized as those are, but we know that it's difficult to keep the centralization and helping the users to do this and to not lose the private keys in an easy way. We know that problem, and we will tackle it from different perspectives. We will for sure have the same ways that blockchain enables now to hold private keys and to control them, that are difficult for non-tech savvy users, but we want to try a different approach, also using the traditional ways of maintaining user email and passwords via a centralized entity that could help you in the case you lose your password. But I am more interested in other types of solutions, such as the ones that are offered for example, what is called social recovery. That is a way that is really user-friendly, where you can, with cryptographic algorithms, you can store your private key, little pieces of your private key in different persons or entities you trust. And if you lose your private key, you can recover them by having at least, for example, 3 out of 5 persons you trust saying that you want to recover your private key. So this is called social recovery because to do this, you need to interact socially with these people or entities and demonstrate you have lost your private key and you are not a thief. So for the user, it's just only adding friends to a list, and when you want to recover, just pressing a button, and you don't have to store anything in paper, nor a hardware wallet, not even on a centralized server. You put pieces of it on entities you trust. But yes, with multi-sig, as says Stefan, multi-sig is similar approach of the hardware wallet. And many ask me also the chicken and egg problem, how you will do to start having these persons of who you trust if they don't use the technology. You can start using centralized entities that could verify your phone number or your email or even a password. And then you can add more people when these systems have more growth and users. You can start adding more people and not only this centralized entity. So you could have more of those. And nobody could ever recover your private key unless all of them together say they want to. I see someone is writing there. Pablo is saying, what about the costs? If using a public blockchain, which operations or interactions will have a transaction fee? Well, we think that getting a digital identity should be free for the users. If we cannot manage to do that, that will never be adopted by anyone, because I can open a Facebook account in 2 minutes or a Google account in 2 minutes for free. And that's really important to start with. We want to do it that way. About the cost, that is the interesting part about the verifiable credentials and DID concepts. Most of these interactions are non-blockchain related. So when I share a verifiable credential, when I issue it, when I store it, there are no blockchain transactions there. So there are no fees about that. There are blockchain transactions in some specific ways or instances that I have mentioned before, and in those cases, depending on the use case, the entities that deliver the solutions will decide who pays for it, if they will pay for it or the user will pay for it. But as I said, mainly you don't interact that much with blockchain, at least on the way we see it. There are other solutions that have more blockchain interactions, but not in our ones. Alfonso asks, how does the fees or costs work when I provide my credentials with a platform like Taringa, for example? I think I have answered this one. Yes, there are no costs. You just share it, and with cryptography, Taringa can verify it for free. There are some costs, for example, that will be related to the storage of the verifiable credentials, for sure, because somebody has to put a server. Even if you use IPFS or Swarm, somebody has to pin those files. If not, you will lose it, and somebody will have to pay for that. And we are thinking about many possibilities related to that maybe the user could have a freemium way in which he has a top maximum way to store credentials, and then if he wants more storage, he can pay for it. Or there could be other companies or entities that could be interested in pinning files, or even we could use, for example, Google Drive to store credentials, and that would be for free. But the important thing is that the privacy and encryption of the credential remains. I don't see more questions. Maybe yes. No. I don't know, Amelia or Fran, if you have any other. If not, I think we can close, no? Okay, perfect. Thanks, Fran. Yes, thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for being here. I hope it was useful for you. And well, thanks also Riff and IOE for inviting me to do this webinar.